Terra here. These are especially challenging times. History is collapsing in on itself. The natural world is being degraded and disappearing before our eyes. Suppressed hatreds are rising up to the surface, and fear is driving many people to seek that brutal fist of control to create the illusion of safety. The questions are fundamental and existential. What kind of a world do we want to live in? How do we create health and safety for our loved ones? How do we save the natural world from our own greed? How do we create a society that's not dependent on violence, exploitation, and prejudice? There's no governmental committee or think tank that gets us out of this one. There's only one task that lies before us, and that is the restructuring of our habits of mind, of body, and emotions. It's only through fundamental transformation that we can create a society that is inclusive, just, and healthy. It means breaking out of the old and embracing the new. Most habits are not a result of ignorance. I've often asked clients if they could list 7 things that they could do to improve their health, and they can all do it. Not only are they aware of what needs to be changed, but they also have a fairly good idea of what to do about it. So what's missing? I remember being at a conference on diet and cancer in the 1970s, and on one panel it consisted of men and women who had reversed their cancer with diet and other health habits. Every one of them said that cancer had been the best thing that had happened to them. The reason was that having their life on the line had forced them to make changes that they would not have otherwise made. Their goal was to stay alive, and so they were willing to change. They were willing to reject social normalcy, the judgment of others, and their own conditioning to create a new and better life. It was the prognosis of death that prompted action. How can we not interpret our present situation as a prognosis of death for the present institutions, of suppressions of some for the benefit of others? Would there be a present rising of people all over the world without videos of men being killed because of their race? Of peaceful young men and women being attacked with chemical weapons? For elderly people being pushed to the ground for challenging authority? For the images of modern stormtroopers in full battle gear policing their fellow citizens who are craving justice? These videos are the CAT scans that we seem to demand to prove that there is a social cancer and that it's real. Denial is understandable, but useless and childish. The question we might ask is, do I have to wait for an emergency, or can I decide to change my ways right now? This question is an important one for individual well-being, social justice, and environmental health. Do we want to be an agent of change in an unhealthy world? The person who's aware that their life is on the line is really facing a common reality. Our lives are on the line. Our society is on the line. The planet is on the line. If we acknowledge this, we know that the time for negotiation is gone. Then transformation is possible. This is not a time for making simple structural adjustments. It's a time for moral clarity and passionate engagement. This transformational process is usually a response to challenge. The metamorphosis of the caterpillar to the butterfly is an instructive tale here. The caterpillar lives its life going from leaf to leaf. It sheds its skin several times, every time getting rid of one that's more rigid for one that's less rigid. But when it knows it's exhausted the possibilities of its caterpillarness, it finds a safe place to be. It makes a hard shell to protect it for its internal work. And that shell is created out of all of its past being. Inside, the complete disassembly of the former self happens, and within that shell, it dissolves, it turns into caterpillar soup, and it rearranges itself into something very different. It prepares for a vastly different life, It no longer wants to crawl just from leaf to leaf. Now it wants to fly. But the job of metamorphosis is not finished until the shell of the chrysalis is broken through. That excess tissue of the past life now forms a barrier that must be broken. And it's not an easy job. It's the work of breaking out of the chrysalis that's essential for the butterfly to have the strength to fly. Once it's breached the shell, it takes a deep breath and that pumps fluid into its wings, and then it can fly. If a well-meaning human were watching that drama and that struggle, and they attempted to cut the chrysalis free and free the butterfly would die. It needs to break out of that chrysalis on its own, that detritus from its past. It needs that to strengthen its mind and its body. Liberation is always a struggle. It involves digesting the past, the intention to change, the breaking of limitations of the old, and the passionate desire to act. We want there to be shortcuts, but there are none. Now, there are those that crave power and are driven by hate and fear. They fear breaking out of that shell, and they exercise a violent resistance to anything that challenges their delusional vision of a perfect past. Always a past where they and theirs held control. I have friends who will shy away from the concept of power and may say that only love is the answer. They may feel that meditation or prayer will shake the foundations of hate and domination that seek to rule. It is, I'm afraid, wishful thinking. Let me read a section of a speech by Martin Luther King. He made this speech in 1967, just before he was, 7 months before he was assassinated. And it speaks to an issue very similar to this. There is nothing wrong with the power if power is used correctly. You see, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. One of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with resignation and power with the denial of love. Now we've got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So now is the time for powerful love. The love for the world, the love for each other, the love across racial boundaries and prejudices. So Marlene and I invite you to join us in the evolution which we all need to make together. Thank you for listening. Be well.